Thomas, and Yotam is here with me. We're both researchers in the peer-to-peer team at DFINITY, and today's topic is the new exchange rate mechanism. Let me start by saying that after this presentation, very soon we will create a motion proposal proposing exactly this, the mechanism I'm going to present today. So everybody who owns some neurons, please vote once the proposal is up. So let's have a quick look at the agenda. As I mentioned, the topic is a new exchange rate mechanism. I will start with some background information to make sure everybody understands why we need such a mechanism to begin with, what the current mechanism does, and then, of course, why we feel like it's not all that great and how we want to change it. All right, and after going through the proposal and some technical details about our proposal, there will be time for a Q&A session. Okay, that being said, let's dive right in. So what you can see here on this slide is an overview of the entire ICP cycles mechanisms. On the right-hand side, you see the inflationary mechanisms, the ledger paying out no providers and stakers, voters in newly minted ICP. And on the left-hand side, you see developers kind of sending ICP to the cycle minting canister to burn ICP and generate cycles which are required to power application canisters. So this is the main deflationary mechanism that we have in our system. So other than the different kind of use case scenarios for ICP and cycles, they also differ in that the ICP price is determined by the markets, whereas the cycle price is pegged to XDR, which is the currency code of the IMF SDR, which is a basket of 5 currencies. So since ICP is converted to cycles and we have this peg for the price of cycles, it follows that we need to know how many XDR is one ICP, obviously, for this conversion. And since the price of ICP fluctuates and the XDR value also changes over time, we need a mechanism to keep the current, to know this exchange rate at all times in order to get the fair, the correct amount of cycles when converting ICP to cycles. So we required such a mechanism from day one, and in fact, we always had such a mechanism. And an overview of the current mechanism is shown in this slide. So how it works, on the left-hand side, we have market data providers. Only these parties know the USD XDR rates. And we have exchanges which trade ICP, so they determine the ICP USD rate. And what we have here in the middle is an important glue component. We have what we call conversion rate providers. So those are just processes running in different data centers. So we host them. They fetch data from these providers and exchanges periodically. They compute median rates over all the data that they collect to make sure we kind of get rid of outliers and create ICP XDR exchange rate proposals and send them off to the governance canister. And then they also vote on them. So this is a fairly automated process running once every 10 minutes. And when a proposal is accepted, the accepted rate is extracted and sent to the cycles minting canister, which updates the current exchange rate. So this is, in a nutshell, how it works currently. So what is not to like? So this has been running for a long time, and apparently it does work. But it does have a few downsides. First of all, we have to create many proposals. So as I said before, every 10 minutes, there's another proposal. So this is way too much to vote on them manually. In fact, we also hide them by default on dashboard because there are so many. And another problem, of course, is every time a proposal fails, we lose 10 ICP. So the neurons that the conversion rate providers control, they lose ICP. And if they run low, we have to top them up. And yeah, so why would they be rejected? For various reasons. There might be network outages we experience and so on. So we constantly have to keep an eye out for any kind of failures there, which is a bit cumbersome. But yeah, the main disadvantage, of course, is decentralization is not great at all. Obviously, those are proposals, and everybody's free to create their own proposals, but nobody would ever do that in reality. So it's essentially a DFINITY run mechanism, right? And we were aware of that from the start. And yeah, for a long time, we were looking into alternatives, and now finally, we have a different proposal on the table. Yep, so let's jump straight to the proposal. And there is one key piece that we require in our new proposal, and that is the new ability of canisters to make HTTP calls and receive responses. So this is a very exciting feature that is very powerful and will hopefully be rolled out in the upcoming weeks.
Yeah.
And yeah, this makes it possible to interface with any kind of existing web services and data sources on the traditional web. And yeah, it essentially replaces any kind of oracle you would need otherwise for data ingestion, because you can write a canister that simply fetches data from the sources itself. So making use of this mechanism, the kind of high-level view of our proposed mechanism is very simple. So we still have our data providers. So we need Forex data sources, and we need still the exchanges, but there's nothing in the middle anymore. We simply have a new canister, which we call the exchange rate canister. And the task of this canister is simply to fetch the Forex data periodically and also interact with all the exchanges, similar to how the conversion rate providers kind of do it currently, but now we have a decentralized canister that does this work. So we can get information about any base unit in USD and then even convert it to any other fiat currency. And now the cycle-meeting canister no longer passively updates the rate when a proposal has been accepted. Now it has to periodically query the exchange rate canister to get an update on the current rate. So, and that's already it, right? In one simple slide, it explains the main idea behind the proposal. So why do we like it? Well, first of all, obviously we don't have any dependency on any automated data ingress mechanism anymore. And also, the second point is kind of important to get the XDR rates. We currently use subscription-based market data sources or services, and it's not easy to get just open free services for that. So we won't need to rely on any of these data providers anymore. And also, because we have this general exchange rate canister, we don't need to restrict ourselves to just the ICP XDR rate, right? So that's why we don't call it conversion rate canister. It's a very more general purpose exchange rate canister. And you can ask for the exchange rate of any cryptocurrency compared to any other cryptocurrency or a fiat currency. And since it's simply run by a canister, it will be open source. Yeah, no dependency on any centralized entity. This is, of course, yeah, it offers great decentralization as well, which is the main goal. All right, so not too long ago, we started a discussion on the developer forums. Everybody's free to make suggestions and voice their opinions about this upcoming feature. And as I mentioned in the beginning, we'd like to create a motion proposal soon, probably in the upcoming days. So again, everybody that has a neuron, please vote once the proposal is out. All right, so now let's delve a bit into more technical details. So as mentioned before, the exchange rate canister needs to talk to Forex data sources. And as the conversion rate providers in the current incarnation do, we don't rely on a single source, obviously, because then again, we would have a central point of failure and a dependency on a single party. So we'd like to use as many data sources that provide services freely on the internet as we can. And most providers of Forex data provide end-of-day rates for all the major fiat currencies. So we are going to have the canister simply query all the sources periodically to get the latest end-of-day rates. And again, we'll probably use something like the median of the rates that we see to make sure we kind of get rid of any potential outliers or simply wrong data into the canister. And we'll probably also keep this the historic rates that we collected for some time, maybe a year, to make it further possible to also query for exchange rates in the past, not just for any kind of rate today. And for the cryptocurrency exchange rate requests, so these will be mainly on demand. So because it's for a general purpose, so we don't know what kind of cryptocurrency exchange rates people will be interested in. So the way it will work is essentially we'll have any other canister that sends some requests plus some cycles, because these calls will not be free, to the exchange rate canister, which will then trigger a lookup or trigger a query on all the connected exchanges, unless a very recent request has come in, and because we also plan to cache this information. If we don't have something in the cache, we'll talk to all the exchanges, again, pick out a reasonable value and return the rate, and then including some metadata. And the metadata might include things such as the number of valid responses, and total number of exchanges queried, and so on, to give the processing canister some kind of an intuition on how confident it can be about the value it received, and maybe also variance of the rates that were processed, and so on. Just some information that might also be useful. All right, and just to maybe give a few examples to make it even clearer, let's say we have a canister that requests the current ICP BTC rate, and if neither rate is cached, right, then this would actually translate into two lookups, one for the ICP USD rate and one for the ICP USD and BTC USD rate. And then once these rates are determined and cached, we can simply compute the ICP BTC rate by dividing the two rates. And as mentioned before, we'd also like to support other fiat currencies, as well as an optional parameter to go back in time. So let's say somebody wants the ICP price in Japanese yen on this at 10 a.m. At the beginning of this year. And as before, if we have a USD JPY rate available for the given day, then we'll get the ICP USD rate and combine it with the Forex information to get the requested exchange rate and return it to the requesting canister. All right, so that is essentially it. As I mentioned before, we actually have been thinking about this for quite some time now, and we also discussed many alternatives over time. I just want to briefly talk about two alternatives that we considered earlier on. And one was to use the HTTP call feature to simply talk to exchanges, but still keep the conversion rate providers, but they would then only talk to market data providers to fetch the current USD XDR rates. So proposals would only be about the USD XDR rate and no longer about the price of ICP. And that would help because the XDR rate does not change quickly. So we would only need very few proposals over time. So that would reduce the number of proposals we need dramatically on its own. And we could actually even use manual voting because there are very few proposals. So people could vote on these kind of exchange rate proposals, lowering the risk of losing ICP. But again, we would still have these conversion rate providers, and it would still, not offer great decentralization. So that's why we didn't go for this mechanism. An alternative would be to introduce what we call SDR oracles. So those are similar to conversion rate provider instances, but instead of creating proposals, they would simply fetch the current rates and offer the USD XDR rate via HTTPS so that the cyclone binning canister could get both types of information via HTTP calls. And the advantage here is we don't have any kind of proposals anymore. So this is even better. But then again, if we don't provide any incentives to run such oracles, decentralization is still not great, especially if most or even all of these oracles are again run by DFINITY. So that's why, we decided for the exchange rate canister, which neither has proposals nor any kind of oracles or special types of service that is run by DFINITY. All right, that's already everything I wanted to share. So the exchange rate canister, which neither has proposals nor any kind of oracles or special types of service that is run by DFINITY. All right, that's already everything I wanted to share. So we can go into the Q&A session.
So far we have two questions. One of them I think is more to me than to you. Jordan Last is asking biggest question: what are the remaining blockers to live HTTP requests? Which is a valid question. We're really at the end of this development of this feature. I mean, we are done with the development. I think we fixed a few bugs that were found recently, and we are working on aligning the public spec with the implementation or vice versa. So everything will be very clear for developers. And once we have everything ready, which should be in a few days or so, we plan to activate the feature on one subnet. We haven't decided which one yet. Since this feature is touching the core consensus protocol, we are a bit conservative in which subnet we want to run this on. We probably will choose a subnet with very few or even zero canisters if we find one, so that we don't break anything. Even though we tested it quite a lot, we want to make sure we don't break existing subnets. So I would say the rollout will start even maybe next week. I'm not sure. I'm not the one responsible for that, but it should start very soon. And it will be available on all subnets within very few weeks. And the next question, I'll let Thomas answer because he probably knows better than me. Do you have, also from Jordan Last, do you have estimates for how much it's going to cost to run this canister? I know it will be in a system subnet, but if it weren't, how much will it cost?
It's a good question. So actually, it might actually be a question for you after all.
Because of the HTTP feature.
Exactly.
Yeah, so the HTTP feature, one call, it really depends on the size of the response. And here the size of the responses are very small. Yeah. So for now, the pricing of the HTTP call is based on the size of the request and the response. And if the request and the response are small, I don't remember the exact numbers, but it's not going to cost too much. Since we're planning on caching here, I think a single request would actually be translated to 2 HTTP requests, right? If it's not cached.
It might be just one, depending on the nature.
Yeah, but the worst case.
In the worst case.
Oh no, not just 2, because we've talked to multiple exchanges and so on. But I think still it would be probably the order of some like lower tens of requests per query. And since they're very small, I don't expect it to be super expensive. Yeah.
Yes, and as Jetta mentioned, so we are going to send every request to every exchange, yes, right? And if we need a new rate that is not cached, so this gives us a factor. And of course, we would like to talk to many exchanges to make it more robust, something in the order of hopefully around 5 to 10 exchanges.
Yep.
So that is, of course, increasing the cost by a factor of 10, let's say, like 1 order of magnitude. And then, of course, it depends very much on usage, right? Because if people only care about a certain rate and ask again and again, and since we're caching, this would actually be fairly cheap, right? But if it's a very popular service and people ask about historic rates for hundreds of different cryptocurrencies, then costs can grow significantly.
But for fiat currencies, we will probably have most of it cached anyway, because it only updates once a day. So it's more for the crypto part that we'll have this fan out of requests. And again, since these requests are going to be very small, or the responses, the order of magnitude of 10 or more, a bit more than 10 is not that significant in my opinion.
But it's a fixed cost plus.
There is some fixed cost per request plus some significant weight for the size of the response. Mm-hmm. The idea is to incentivize users to ask for small responses. And you can even limit within the feature the size of the response you're accepting. Yeah. So we have another question from Rudy Hasbun. He said, this will be great for oracles. One question about cycles. When ICP is burned to create cycles, are there XDR reserves somewhere that back these newly minted tokens? Otherwise, this is an algorithmic stablecoin that is not 100% backed. Such stablecoin have had 100% failure rate, see UST Terra. The cycle problem become exponentially worse when we consider that cycles will be used for DeFi, XTC token, which might greatly increase demand for cycles.
Yeah. So I just saw a comment, Jordan wrote that it's not really a stable coin, which I would agree. And one important aspect, of course, is that we convert ICP to cycles, but we don't convert back, right? And there's no guarantee that you can get any certain amount of ICP back for the cycles that you have. Of course, people might build exchanges and then they might try to promise a certain conversion back, which means they need a certain backing. But then again, that is not part of the core protocol, right? Yes. So for us, I would argue, because we're only converting in one direction, and there is no system supported way of going back, or any guarantee that you can go back, we're not really at risk.
Okay, and I think for now we don't have any more questions, but feel free to post more. So there is a response from Rudy, fair enough, but this might potentially lead to a huge oversupply of cycles.
Well, there is a certain risk, that you can, depending on market conditions, that you can stack up on cycles and then, use services at the lower cost for some time. That is true, right? But that is how it currently works, and that's not related really to our proposal here.
Okay. Thanks, Rudy. Any other questions? Okay.
All right, cool. Great. If there are no other questions, yep, then I think we can close today's community conversation.
Yep.
Thanks everyone
Thank you
for joining. Yeah. Have a great day and see you next time.